clarification or something you really want to ask, go ahead. There's not a big group here tonight, so we don't need to be overly formal. Can you go to the next slide, Katie? So we're going to talk a little bit about the objectives, a little bit about the climate action context, a little bit about GHG emissions, climate change. We're going to talk about some of the actions the city's been working on, and then next steps. And then I'll just remind folks to mute while we're listening to Katie, and then if you raise your hand, I'll call on you and you can try to remember to unmute yourself. Okay, I think that was everything that I wanted to say at the beginning. So I'll turn it over now to Katie and we'll go through kind of what we're up to here.
Sure. Excuse me. So I think we sort of touched upon this a little bit with the agenda for the presentation, but the goal or the goals of the webinar is to emphasize why we are looking at climate adaptation and mitigation and how that builds into a climate action plan. So what the also what the function and the scope of that climate action will be, and thinking about what climate action is going on in the city of Whitehorse, but also thinking about into the future, obviously, of course, and giving you an idea of where we are within our climate action plan process and the project that we're completing for the city, and give you an idea of sort of timeline of when things will be in draft form, when we would be looking to re-engage with you and get some more feedback from you. So the Stantec was hired by the city to produce a climate action plan. So when we're talking the project, I don't think I mentioned it too much more in the slides throughout, but if I mentioned project, that's what I'm referring to. And we have two main goals coming out of this project, and it's to determine the extent to which climate change is considered in the city's targets. So what's already been established by the city in previous work. So the sustainability plan, the official community plan. So looking at how climate change is considered already in that way, and also to develop a strategy for mainstreaming climate mitigation and adaptation, both in the short and long-term planning for the city. What I do want to note is a little bit on terminology. There are times when people will be talking and they will use mitigation and adaptation interchangeably. So just for clarity, if you are not aware of the difference between the two terms, mitigation, also sometimes referred to as sustainability, that's looking at actions to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea is doing things to help reduce global warming. Adaptation, also sometimes referred to as resilience, those are actions to address the impacts of climate change. So basically it's saying, regardless of how we're doing with the greenhouse gas side of things, we're seeing climate change, we're seeing impacts. How can we reduce the impacts? So we talk about both in this climate action plan development. You'll see another slide later on where you can see sort of how things overlap. But just I wanted to clarify that because sometimes people will get a little caught up and use the terms interchangeably, but there is a difference. So the way we are approaching this project is we're reviewing the city's existing climate strategies, as I mentioned, the sustainability plan, the community plan. So we're looking at what you're already doing, and we're also engaging with city staff, the government, and we'll be also engaging with the local knowledge holders. So we're trying to make sure we have a nice holistic approach to our work. So to set the stage, and I'm imagining for the people on who decided to join this, you probably are already aware of some of these things. So I'll try to be relatively quick with the setting the stage slides. But essentially, climate is changing. That's sort of the running theme. We see it in the news. We see it all over. We're really focused in on human-induced greenhouse gas driven climate change. So as it seems like the city in general is very aware that climate change is happening, from what we've learned as we've been working through our project. But just to reemphasize that the climate is changing. We are seeing warming temperatures across nearly all of the globe, and we see it. The warming is disproportional. So we're seeing higher rates of warming in the north. You living in the Yukon, being located in the north, you are seeing these effects at a greater pace or greater rate of change from the global rate of change, or global increase in temperature. So unfortunately, you are some of the more strongly impacted people at this time, and you will continue to be. So this may be relatively new to some of you. The way we look at how the climate may potentially change into the future is we look at different greenhouse gas trajectories. So can you see my mouse? Oh, you can. Excellent. So on the left side of the screen, both of these images come from the International Panel on Climate Change, their newest report, the sixth assessment report. It is publicly available if you're interested. I will say the official report is extremely large and very technical. So the summary for policymakers is a great place to go if you're interested to learn more. It's much shorter and more digestible. But what you'll see are some of these types of images where we look at different ways greenhouse gases could continue on into the future, and we look at scenarios where essentially we continue on with the way we're working, heavy reliance on fossil fuels, lots of greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere as we continue on through the century. And then we look at situations where we do some mitigation. We do some reduction of greenhouse gases to varying degrees. And we have some very, I would say, ambitious scenarios near the bottom here, where we're very aggressive with greenhouse gas emissions. We're able to get down to sorry, I should have said this earlier. This is global emissions. So this isn't the Yukon or Whitehorse specifically, but globally. So we have a whole range of different ways greenhouse gases could continue on into the future. But the big takeaway is no matter what we're doing, we will continue to see the temperature rise. It's partly due to the fact that even if we stopped emissions today, the atmosphere will continue to react to what's being put in it till now. These gases have long lifespans. Some last for a few decades, some last for centuries, depending on what the greenhouse gas is. So we will continue to see the temperature rise, and depending on how we go further into the future, the more greenhouse gases that are put in, the more the global temperature will rise, and then that will follow follow along into, more temperature rise for the Yukon, more temperature rise for Whitehorse. So we can't say exactly how we're going to trend into the future. That's something that we won't know for certain, but we can look at what we call plausible scenarios. So that's what we do to look at how things are going to continue. So what does that mean for us? That I have a quote here from that 6th assessment report. It's a bit long, but what I want to have you kind of focus in on is that human induced climate change, and you can see here, more frequent and intense extreme events, widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people. Again, I suspect that a number of you on this call, because you're tuning in, you're probably aware of the fact that we are seeing these impacts. Whitehorse is seeing these impacts. Perhaps you've even personally dealt with some of these issues in the past. And to give you some ideas of what we mean by extreme events, this is a nice little graphic. It doesn't include everything, but it gives you an idea of what we consider an extreme event. So these are things that are on the order of maybe a few hours, maybe a couple days, that type of thing. Drought is a bit longer term, seasonal to maybe annual or multi-annual. But things like heat waves, extreme rainfall, storms, cyclones, whichever terminology you might want to use, flooding events. These things are happening more frequently with more intensity under climate change. There are also what we consider slow onset events, things like sea level rise, glacial retreat, loss of biodiversity. These things take or they occur over longer time periods. They're gradual changes. So they may not be impacting us quite today, but they will into the future. So there's a whole range of things that we want to think about when it comes to climate change. So, oops, is that going to flip?
Katie, we have a
Yes.
question here. JP,
yes.
JP, do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Hi. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe you're preaching to the choir. I mean, we kind of know all those things. So I would appreciate if we can move to the adaptation and mitigation side of it.
And actually,
thanks.
I think this slide too. Why? Because we have flooding in the streets of Whitehorse today in January. Please, let's get to some action.
Okay. So yeah, I will.
Wait, sorry, Katie, we have one more. We have one other hand up. Hector, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, it's Hector. I just wanted to make sure that, in fact, when it comes to the Yukon, that a slow or longer term effect is permafrost melting. Because it's a little unique to inland as opposed to shoreline stuff, but it's pretty real for Yukon.
Yep, and we do have that as one of our climate hazards that we look into. I think it's a slide or two away, but we have a list of things that we're looking at. Permafrost is one.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll go. I won't bother to talk about the image on here, but just as you mentioned, obviously you're already feeling these effects. That's a key driver to why we would want to do an action plan. And that falls into protect people, property, environment, maintain service level. That might be a little bit more toward things like power utilities, that type of stuff. I won't go through this image, but basically it's a reminder that investment today is going to give us a return in the future. So yeah, I won't bother getting through this because like you said, I suspected that the people who were joining into this would already know most of this, but without knowing who's here, we do want to make sure that we cover these I guess you could call them backgrounder slides, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Is that a hand?
Ed, Keith. Unmute yourself and then go ahead.
Could you explain advance equity and climate justice? What does that actually mean, to advance equity and climate justice?
So part of the issue of the issues with climate change is that the lower income population, the more vulnerable populations, they're often hit the hardest by these impacts. So part of our work with the city is not only to identify, how can we address impacts in general, but it's also to think about how can we, for lack of a better way of saying it, level the playing field. Make sure, the actions don't just benefit, one section of people in the city. We want to make sure we're benefiting everyone involved. So we are considering the different demographics, I think would be the right word, of the people in the city. So the idea is to, we may not get to true equity, but we can advance toward it.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So yeah. So I won't go into this. Where I'm sure you're aware that you've already been doing action. And the idea is at this point, figuring out how to plan, prepare, and respond so that the city can be resilient. So I won't really spend time on this. Yep. So the plan itself, I already sort of mentioned this in the earlier slide, but the idea is to help develop actions that can both reduce greenhouse gases and or adapt to impacts of climate change. The comment about you have flooding in the streets. Zoe was telling me you're getting winter rain, and that's obviously something that is a big impact. That's not something you've had to deal with. So, dealing with that could be a adaptation strategy. How can we better prepare the city to deal with that kind of event? Flood protection may or may not fall under that window. Oftentimes we're thinking more about riverine flooding, but it's things like, making sure your stormwater drainage systems can handle winter rain or more intense rainfall into the future. Making sure your buildings have proper, I don't think waterproofing is the right word, but like the proper ceilings around to help prevent flooding of basements, that type of thing. So thinking about adaptations, how do we deal with those impacts of these events happening while also reducing Whitehorse's contribution to the greenhouse gas emissions? So the structure that we're using to develop this action plan, we have the vision that was set in the Whitehorse 2040 official community plan. That's what we're using as our starting point. From there, we are working with the city to develop goals and then targets and then action plans. So I think this is where the interest really is lying based on the comments that we're hearing. And we aren't quite at the point where we can talk about actions. We are still gathering information and putting things together, but we will come back to you. It's going to be, I think, late spring. We'll show you a timeline where we will have the draft climate action plan together, where we'll talk about the actions that have been developed and get your feedback on those. I'll talk to you about how we are gathering information to develop this action plan. And then of course there's the implementation and the monitoring, putting these things into action, and then looking at, are we achieving the goals, and is it following back into the vision? So what I can talk about a little bit in terms of actions. So this is sort of a schematic of different types of actions, who would be taking the lead and implementing them, taking control of making sure things actually get done. Really, we are focused in on these two inner circles where the city is able to implement and control actions that we develop. Corporate opportunities, the city is able to implement and control things like buildings, vehicle, equipment purchasing. This is not an exhaustive list necessarily, but it's to give you an idea of kind of where things fall. And then we are talking to the various departments within the city. Recreation, I don't know if recreation and parks kind of sit together. I'm not 100% sure. But we're talking to the engineers, the roads people. We're talking to your transportation system people, your planners, the waste and landfill people, water. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, no. Wastewater, liquid waste, and that's also sewage as well. But these kind of things, because it falls under the city's ability to implement and control, this is really where we're focused in on trying to develop actions. There are things that will come up that will be out of the city's ability to implement and control, but they can advocate for actions to be done. So things like the power utilities, telecom, that type of stuff within the Yukon in general. They can help advocate for changes at that level. It's something that's out of their control, but it can be advocated for. So we are doing two. Oh, I see hands. Oh, Zoe's muted, but
Sorry. Hector, you can go next, and then Peggy, you'll be after Hector. Go ahead.
To me, one of the missing parts of the inner two circles would likely be building heating systems, because they can be dealt with national or territorial building codes, but they can also be dealt with city bylaws. So that's one where there's the potential for the city to to play a leading role in terms of heating systems that reduce GHGs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and there's it's in a later slide, and it's a bit more geared toward, I believe, residential buildings and homes, but there are it's the Blake, correct me if I get this wrong, but it's municipal loans to put in like solar and heat pumps, that type of stuff. So there is some actions already being done with that, and yeah, agreed with the bylaw
Okay.
component too. There's I think there are some bylaws under under review. Is that the way to say it?
Yeah, Katie, so there's a bylaw review going on right now, and the city does have control over bylaws like that. So it's a really good comment, Hector. Thanks for that. In terms of the in terms of your comment, Katie, about funding for heat pumps and making homes more efficient, that funding would be through the Yukon government, not through Whitehorse.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But it is available through, I think, Yukon Energy Solutions, and I believe that there may be people on the line from who can speak to that as well too.
Okay, we'll go then to Peggy. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm wondering, considering the
I think you got muted.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Will the goals, targets, and these actions be tied to definite dates with committed reviews of what's happening? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I think Blake, is that sorry, Blake, is that something that you can answer? Because I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could take a crack at it. So, I mean, we as Katie mentioned, we are at the very beginning stages of getting into the planning. At this point, it's really just a lot of review of information, and so over the next few months, the plan is going to be taking shape from the feedback that is provided from different partners and city staff and public in general. But to answer your question, when we get to that phase, the vision for this is that there will be a full monitoring plan to track the progress, to make sure that we're understanding kind of how the plan's performing, where we are in terms of meeting those targets that are set. So that is a core intention for the action plan for sure.
So the targets will be set to dates.
I can't comment on that just because the plan hasn't taken shape yet. So I can't, that's something that'll have to be determined as we go. But what I can say is that the monitoring of targets to see how things are performing is going to be crucial to the plan overall, making sure that that implementation is able to stay on track. So I guess, for lack of a better answer, maybe stay tuned on that question. And like I said, as the plan takes shape, we can give more detail at that point. But it's a little early to tell at this point.
Okay, thanks, Blake. We'll go to Robin now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for putting this on. I guess one other thing that I am thinking about when it relates to climate action and, the work of a city versus other levels of government or other, organizations is the fact that, over the next couple of years, we're probably going to see, we're going to probably have elections at the municipal, territorial, and federal levels. And it's entirely possible that the results of those elections are going to have pretty dramatic effects on, the type of commitments that we're seeing and the type of money that is available for, say, a municipal government to implement measures around climate change. And so I guess I'm just curious, like where that's going to fit into this plan, like how to, build some buffers or how to build additional kind of political strength and to if this plan is adopted, how do we ensure that this plan will be championed regardless of whatever else is happening at other levels of government or even within the city government?
So yeah, I think I'll pass that one to you, Blake, again.
Yeah.
Putting all the easy ones over to me. No, I think that's a really good comment, Robin, and it's definitely a realistic one for sure. And I know other municipalities have also been looking at that as well too, because it's just a fact of life that there are elections and changes in government can mean changes in priorities. What I would say is that with the action plan that's being developed right now is a priority of this specific council, the current council. And as such, we want to make sure that there's a robust that the targets and the goals that are set in this are robust, and that it really kind of emphasizes that action that we're talking about. Because ultimately, this is a response to the climate emergency that was declared in 2019 by another council. I think that, as it's pretty hard to argue that climate change is having a huge impact here. And I think that what I'll say is that as the plan's being developed right now, what we'd like to see is kind of to put in place those milestones to make sure that we stay on that track of keeping action going. And so I think that as the plan takes shape and we start seeing what those actions are and how we can monitor and implement those, the key will be making sure that there's a really solid implementation aspect to this plan that can transcend any kind of electoral changes and changes in government, that kind of thing. The other thing I guess I would add with that, though, is that it's really, the success of the plan is also going to be really beholden on the public as well too, to make sure that this stays in the public sight, because ultimately the more important it is to the public, it gets picked up by media and it becomes more important to any council or any government that gets in. So I guess I just put that out there as well too. It will take I think a full community approach to making sure that it's successful and that it's able to endure.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. I see Keith, you have your hand up, so we'll go to you, and then I'd like to let Katie go through a few more slides, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. And I guess this probably will fall on Blake again, but it says here climate action plan, and usually these things, all these plans have these initiatives and goals put in them. One thing I've found with the city in the past, and I bring this up quite often, is the fact that we don't get any reports on how the city is going about implementing things. For example, we'll have a plan that has 25 different initiatives, and yet as a citizen, I have to actively call into departments to find out what the status is of these initiatives. And I think it's the failure of all governments. We get these great plans and we never get any follow-up, like a year later, tell the public, okay, what have we been able to accomplish in this plan and these initiatives? What haven't we been able to accomplish? Are there problems regarding money or staffing or whatever that will cause us not to be able to complete certain of the action plans? But I've been around long enough to see initiatives that are in plans like the OCP, trail plans and so on, that are in documents that are 10 years old, and then they're repeated again 10 years after in the next document because they haven't been done. And that's still happening today. And so I think it's just, I read a book once which said the goal of governments is to create policies, not to implement them. They go on shelves and then they're forgotten. And they look good politically, but they're not acted upon, or not as much as they should be. So I just like to see if this comes forward and we do get this action plan, that it is reviewed on hopefully an annual basis. Somebody tells us, okay, what are we doing? What have we accomplished? What can't we do? Just give us an update. And that would, I think, alleviate a lot of our concerns about some of these things. Anyway, just my comment on that one.
I think it's a great comment, and honestly, Keith, and I it wasn't me that did the applauding emoji, but I probably would have done that as well too. I completely agree with that. It is something that tends to happen quite a bit, is that, you know, policies are developed and then sit on shelves and don't get implemented, and you know, it's with a plan that is dealing with something that is such a present part of life right now, and that's unfolding every day as we're seeing it. This is going to need to really have be monitored, and be able to be accessible. That monitoring be able to be accessible to the public in some way, shape, or form. So 100% agree. I would, you know, and this is something that I've said a lot, and I know that we've been talking with Stantec about, you know, making sure that we can have a way to be able to have this actionable, achievable, and be able to have it monitored. And you know, it's not something where you should have to call to get updates. I agree. I know that the city has been working on pilot. For example, there was just a pilot project we just completed where we're trying to create an easier way for the public to kind of digest a lot of the information that is available. So as it becomes available, we're hoping that some of these mechanisms and tools can be used to help that way. In the interim, though, I know that, you know, again, I'm speaking kind of at the very beginning of the book, and you know, about something about the last page in the book here. So what I will say is that I'm very passionate about this. I want you to know that this is something that if you have any questions, either during this planning process or after this planning process, as plans unfold, you know, you can give me a call anytime, reach out by email. I'm happy to chat more offline about this as well too. But just know that this is something that, so just to let people know, I joined the city in May, so I'm fairly new to the city, but it was the development of this plan that actually kind of got me really interested in coming being part of this. So I share your enthusiasm and your interest in kind of having this information available. So we'll make sure that my contact information's in the chat, so people can follow up with me if they want to after this as well. So hopefully that answers the question, at least for this point. But I'm happy to chat later too.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. Forrest also put a comment in the chat to suggest an annual scorecard with % complete meter, you know, something simple that won't just be another action that's supposed to get done. Okay, Katie, let's keep going.
Okay, so while we are not at the point of talking about possible actions, and I understand that was, I think, the hope from some of you. What we can talk about is the work we are doing to help guide the development of actions, help inform where should actions be taken, help prioritize where things should be sort of approached first. And so what we have been doing, both are to some level complete. I would say the climate vulnerability assessment is a little bit further along than the corporate and community GHG emissions inventories. We're still working on some of those numbers. But both of these are sort of the main things that we at Stantec are doing in order to help inform the climate action plan. So the climate vulnerability assessment, this is a high level assessment. We're looking at the city's infrastructure portfolio. And when I say city in this regard, I'm talking about Whitehorse in general, not just city-owned assets and infrastructure. I have a slide, I think not the next one, but the following one, where I have a list of all the different assets that we're considering. And you'll see that it's not all city-owned stuff, but we're looking at Whitehorse as a whole. What's in there? What's contributing to you as a community. So that was a little bit of an aside, but what we're doing with the vulnerability assessment is we're looking at a relatively high level, what is the vulnerability of each of these different types of infrastructure. And in order to do that, we are looking at it's a function of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. So exposure simply is the asset or the system that we're looking at exposed to climate hazards. And that's a yes or no. For the most part, the answer is yes. There's so many things that are to some level is exposed to climate change. If you were going to bet on it, yes would be the answer to the exposure question. But really where we're looking and spending time looking at, talking to the city, looking at previous documents, that type of thing, is the sensitivity and the adaptive capacity. So with sensitivity, we're looking at what attributes of the system would make it more reactive to climate hazards. So for example, if you were to think about a building, if the building is older, if it's in poor condition, it's going to be more sensitive to climate hazards. On the adaptive capacity side, we'd be thinking about, are there emergency response plans in place to deal with events? Is there funding set aside to deal with the impacts, to help respond and recover to the interaction? The more adaptive capacity you have, the better, obviously. And because we're doing this at a high level, at a portfolio level, we're assigning a low, medium, or high to the sensitivity and the adaptive capacity. So it's considering, things that have a higher sensitivity to climate change, a lower adaptive capacity, they'll have a higher vulnerability, and that can help direct focus to say, okay, these are areas that are high vulnerabilities. This is where we should probably be focusing in on with some of our climate actions. Ideally, climate actions will address multiple things within the city. May or may not be the case, depending on how things shape up. I can't say whether or not that will be the case for most or few. That's something we'll see. But that's what we've been doing on the climate vulnerability side. Help identify where are these interactions, what's the vulnerability, and help guide where we're going to go with the action planning. Don't see any hands. So I mentioned this earlier when there was the comment about permafrost being a slow, gradual onset climate hazard. So this is a very graphic image of, or lots of graphics on this image, but this highlights the climate hazards that we are focusing in on. We are trying to capture pretty much everything. I see a hand and I'll get to you in 1 second. We're trying to capture the various different types of hazards that likely have already been impacting you, but maybe something that hasn't necessarily impacted you just yet, but acknowledging that there are risks. Like for example, wildfire. You've dealt with smoke from wildfires, you've dealt with distant wildfires, but not you haven't had a situation where you've had a fire roll through the city, not like a Kelowna or a Lytton, BC situation, that type of thing. But it is a very much in the minds of everyone we've talked to. Wildfire comes up with everyone we talk to, and concerns about that. So, question.
Yeah. So we'll go to Florian.
Yeah, I'm interested in your opinion about the intersection between climate change and the global economy. Like so far, everything that's been said, it almost feels like Whitehorse is a bit of an island that's separate from the rest of the world. But in my understanding, there is also a whole host of financial issues that, like for instance, I think there could seriously be some consideration to have a backup currency that could be used when the climate starts impacting the economy to such a degree that there is no longer a possibility to maintain the global system functioning. I don't know if you give me a minute, may I share my screen? I'd just like to, I just want to reference this book. That's been sold 1 million copies in France. That's basically, it's a graphic novel. It's basically changing the way the whole French culture is starting to shift, because there's this understanding that we currently have $300 trillion of debt globally, and there's a direct relationship between the carbon emitted and the GDP that we produce. And the green technologies, even though we put a huge amount of effort in it, their energetic concentration doesn't suffice, which means that due to the 3% growth of GDP a year, which is a doubling in 25 years. Okay, so 3% growth is a doubling in energy consumption in 25 years. It's also a tenfold over 80 years. And to maintain our economy, it requires 3%. So essentially, we can't have climate, we can't have our climate or our economy, we can't have both, essentially. And so we're going to choose the economy because none of you wants to lose their savings or their retirement plan. Nobody wants to lose that in the world, but it is built into the currency that we need this exponential growth, okay? And so this whole conversation of, oh yeah, we're going to address climate change and have the economy at the same time breaks down very quickly when you start interconnecting those fields of climate change and finance. And it's very rare that you have somebody that has actually both. I mean, as surprising as it is, it boggles the mind that we cannot see the elephant in the room, which is with the current financial system, we cannot address the climate change because it requires a 3% growth, which requires those fossil energies, because the green ones just don't have the energetic density to deliver. You know, China is even Germany is starting to use coal again. It's crazy, right? So, and we're already seeing the oil that's depleting, so there's going to be a doubling down. And essentially, if there's no 3% growth, the debt cannot be honored, which means that some countries are going to default. It's fine if a few corporations default, we can bail them out, but we can't bail out countries. And so then, because its finance is so interconnected, then the trickle effect comes. And Canada has 50% business with the States. If the US dollar that's hyper leveraged collapses, Canada's currency will very likely follow. And then there's a run to the bank, and we know what happens in that case. You know, we've seen it 1 million times. So, and then suddenly our currency is gone. And then you can no longer exchange goods, even locally. So can we have a local currency that could be ready to be implemented so that we can at least function locally? I mean, those are some of the questions I think that they seem a little bit out there, I guess, but
at the same time, I don't know if you're familiar with, like I do some resiliency consulting, so I think about this stuff quite a bit. The mini-max strategy, minimizing the maximum loss. You know, you're not polishing the paint of your car if you have summer tires and it's winter. You know, like there's this disconnect between like, yeah, it's good to polish the paint, but there's other scenarios that way supersede that. And there's some nice things we can do, you know, that might cost a lot of money, like changing Whitehorse to electric cars. You know, there's a lot of infrastructure. Yukon Energy doesn't have enough energy anyways, and you know, there's all those considerations. So it might cost a bunch of energy, but then there's other questions. If the supply chains start breaking down in substantial ways and the economy starts suffering in substantial way, can we have enough food locally? Right, and that is not necessarily something the city can do, but the city can use a leverage of educating the public. Anyways, I'm throwing a lot of things here, but
Florian, can you share the name of that book in the chat for
yeah,
people
totally.
if they're interested? That would be helpful.
So, this book is it's pretty thick. It's incredibly thorough. It's a very famous university professor that is basically making these complex relationships available to the public. This is in French, but the English version should come out in a couple of months.
Okay. Yeah, if you could type the name in the chat for folks, that would be good. I mean, my understanding is that the scope of this plan is really sort of what what actions this city can take to climate change, and the things you're talking about are sort of, I think, outside the scope. But like, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Florian.
Okay, sorry, I was just a quick word here. You know, to have a resilient population, it cannot be the city organizing everything. There's just not enough money to have a helper for every citizen. You know, every resilient system out there engages its agents. So basically, it's the elements of the systems need to become more resilient. The only way to do that is to inform them properly and to help them when they're doing the right thing. It's no different than every natural form of life. My body, I don't resolve COVID, my cells do it. You see what I mean? It's like for my ego to beat my heart, eat my food, and digest things, it would be virtually impossible. And we're attempting to do this. And a more resilient systems of governance delegate, and they empower their population. And so to start highlighting the fact that the city cannot do everything. Like I work with, I'm a firefighter, and we're working with the wildfire situation. I'm really interested in wildfire because it's the most visceral and direct threat to Whitehorse right now. And so progressively, we're successfully starting to educate the public as to the danger of fire. But there's all those other things, right? And I think there needs to be a similar effort to. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is like there needs to be a substantial budget for education, and it doesn't need to be serious. It can be quite fun. I mean, like just like this book, it's hilarious. This book is really funny. It's really well put together. There's really solid information, and it's also really funny. And anyways, I will just put the title in there, and yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Florian. I see, Hector, you have your hand up as well. You want to go ahead?
Sure. I just a question on the CVA analysis. It's very high level, and maybe it's a further study, but I'm assuming on the sensitivity aspect, you need to consider impact on the environment, on people, and the economic impact. People, I mean, are people dying or getting sick? So if you could just respond to how do you quantify the sensitivity, of a vulnerability in terms of what you would potentially think about doing about it?
Yeah, so you're right. These impacts aren't just to the physical asset or the system. It has impacts on the population, whether it's someone living in the building, working in the building. We do think about that, but because it is a higher level assessment, we can only look at it at a certain scale. So for example, we do look at the hospital and we think about, the building itself might not be necessarily high sensitivity, but the fact that if you lose the building, or functionality of the building, it is going to be a big impact. Same thing with the bridge that goes over to Riverdale. If you lose that bridge, you lose access to the hospital, you lose access to the aquifer, the main source of water for the city. So like, we are thinking about it in that level. You are right that there are situations where more detailed studies and follow-up studies potentially will be of need, and that may actually be part of the climate action plan, is to say, we know there are particular assets that are high vulnerability, very critical to the city, and then it may be we need to do a further analysis specifically on that particular asset. So I think we're sort of in the middle ground of addressing what you're asking. We are, but not to a detailed level, but we're acknowledging the fact that it may be something that needs to be done in the future. Oh, Zoe, you're muted, but
My God, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peggy. Peggy, do you want to go ahead? You have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering why the CBA process is limited to the city's infrastructure, because it seems to me that if a form of climate lens was applied to all economic decisions being made at the council level, that for instance, let's say a mining company wanted to come in and mine in the middle of the city, would the city consider the cost of the climate in terms of GHG emissions? I mean, these things could be, seems to me more informed decisions could be made at that level before they get to be problematic. And then what are we going to do about it?
So you're suggesting that the city use this type of assessment not only for dealing with like prioritizing infrastructure upgrades or what have you, but for every decision that they're making. Basically,
yeah, over a certain threshold, if there are large economic decisions to be made, they may well have cost to the climate. It's not being looked at or considered. So maybe they should be.
Okay, thanks for that, Peggy. Okay, Katie, keep going.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, sorry. So it's in a couple slides, but we are doing the greenhouse gas inventories, and I think that's something that like your comment about, if something came in and it was going to potentially be a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, that type of thing. Like, I think, and I don't have enough knowledge on that side of things to truly say how it works, but I suspect what you could do is you can run models to say, okay, if we were to add in this, how would that change the emissions for the city? Because that's essentially part of what we're doing, is not only saying how much emissions you have, currently, but if there's changes to to different things, like how would that then change the trajectory? So helping look at how do we meet the targets that have been put in place in the sustainability plan, or if there's additional targets we were to come up with, like how would we actually meet that? So there's ways of looking at how that greenhouse gas emission component would play out. So but yeah, like actually I think we can go back to that other slide if needed, but I think this kind of maybe helps answer the question a little bit too, where there are a large portion of these things are under the city's either ownership or control, but there are things like the LNG plant, the airport, power supply, telecommunications, the hospital, the dam. These are things that are not city owned or operated, but we are including it in our assessments because they are greenhouse gas emitters. They also have big importance to the city, where like I said, if you lose services at the hospital, it's going to be a large impact, or potentially a large impact depending on what the services are, I guess you could think. If you have issues with the airport and you have a situation where perhaps you need to evacuate people due to an event, if the airport's not functional, you're going to have concerns with that. So we aren't thinking about the more hypothetical things of like, oh, hey, a mining company's coming in and wants to do work, how would that impact us? We're just looking at what's there today. But yeah, the greenhouse gas side of things, I think, would address what you're thinking about as well. Okay. So I think I won't go through this bullet point by bullet point. I suspect you have a good understanding of the different things within the city, the different types of buildings and operations that are going on. We did spend time talking to different people from the various departments of the city, so that we could get a good understanding of what there is, what work has been done already. I think in not the next slide, but the one after that, I have some of the examples of actions that are already in place or potentially going to be, or that would be coming into place. But I won't go into this much further, acknowledging what the time is. So what I'll do is,
Katie, could I just
Yes.
ask you to clarify though? I just saw the comment from JP in the chat. Could you just clarify like corporate and community emissions? Like I know that a lot of the things that you listed there, infrastructure and assets, obviously, there are things that are going to influence Whitehorse's GHG emissions. Some of those are not within the sphere of control of the city. So could you comment on that? Obviously, that's something that we want to take note of and things that we want to potentially try to help curb and influence. But I know that you had better some language around that as well too.
Yeah. So the actually, what I'll do is we'll backtrack to the other slide, but because I think this might help the visualization and the understanding of what we mean by community versus corporate GHGs. So community GHGs is looking at Whitehorse as a whole. So it's city owned and operated components. It's, you know, people driving either within the city who live in the city, or people driving through the city to because you are the hub of Whitehorse. So, you know, trucks driving through the city, the airport, not under city control, but is a greenhouse gas contributor to the community GHGs. From the corporate perspective, this is really where the city has control over the GHG emissions. So I will say the blue and the yellow dot are not not to scale per se, but the idea is that the corporate emissions is actually just a small portion of the community. So the city has control over corporate emissions, so there's a much stronger target. I don't want to say aggressive because that might give off the wrong impression, but a higher target to reduce greenhouse gases because the city can control that. On the community side of things, it is harder because, you know, the airport isn't city controlled or operated. So I don't know if that's helping to explain it a little bit better.
Sorry, yeah, I just thought it would be good just to clarify that point, just because yeah, it's important that to note that the city's doing its best to acknowledge, and through the work that you guys are doing at Stantec, to acknowledge all of the different factors within the boundaries, and to have that as part of the equation, so that we know what we're working with. At the same time, I think that there's an element of just, you know, needing to kind of look at what the spheres of influence are, and being able to see how we can influence things to the best degree that we can, and to try to you know, work with, you know, I think it's just it's a testament to the need to build partnerships and work with the community and the public, and again our key partners in this as well too. So it's a challenge. I think that one thing though I would say is that the city is making a lot of effort right now to better understand the assets within its jurisdiction, and that's something that's I think going to be a key part of this process too. And you're right, JP, the city does have influence, and it's something that it will be a key part of making this plan go forward, and making sure that we have targets that will be meaningful.
Okay, I see, Forrest, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yeah. Is my audio okay?
Yep.
Okay. I guess I would just push the city a little bit more. You know, you can't really stick your head in the sand that much, because, you know, on the order of 70% of Whitehorse's emissions are local mobility. And so the city does influence that in the choices it's made in its landform development, in its bylaws, its transportation networks. Those are all city controlled choices that were made in the past. Yes, we're stuck with them now, but the city does influence the largest sources of emissions in our community.
Can I just comment on that for a second?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So that's totally good. It's a really good comment. And I think that one thing that we'd like to see with this plan is kind of like this plan is a little bit like two funnels put together at the narrow end, right? I mean, it's something that there's so much that goes into this plan. It really is. It's very interconnected, and you know, I really appreciate the comments we heard from both Peggy and Florian about the economy and just the connection between climate and economy with this as well too. You know, when we're looking at a lot of the data that's being looked at right now, to the comment that Keith made, there's a lot of plans that have already been made over the last few years, a lot of strategies, a lot of overlap with different things. So there's a lot of things going into the stew right now. And so what we'd really like to see as this kind of starts to take shape is that once it's developed, once we have a robust plan, that the decisions that are going to be made going forward are going to be seen through that lens, through the lens of this climate action plan, so that they can be influenced. And I do completely understand what people are saying about the fact that there have been decisions made in the past that may not align with what the plan ends up coming out with. I think the hope with this is that the plan will be able to influence the decisions, and you know, just like the bylaw rewrite is happening right now, you know, there are always going to be amendments to different rules, regulations, updates to different things. And so I think the hope with this is that as the climate action plan, you know, is developed, once we get to a final place, that it can help be that lens that we start kind of making other decisions with in the future. So that's, again, this is kind of step early in the process with everything, but that is ultimately the hope that with where we're going with this.
Yeah. Thanks, Forrest and Blake. Katie, I think we just have a couple more slides, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay,
And I'll like,
let's
yeah.
wrap them up and
yeah,
then...
and I'll just make one comment on the comments about the transportation. I will say when we've been talking with the city staff, they are having similar comments to that, where it's the, you know, people use their cars for things that, you know, if we could get active transportation more into play, you know, make neighborhoods not just a place for people to live, but to be able to, you know, like the one of the comments was, you know, people will get in a car to drive to Tim Hortons for coffee. It's like, you know, if we could get it a little bit more able for people to walk down the street instead to get what they need. Like there have been comments along those lines as well. So you're not alone in your thought processes. So I just wanted to note that as well. So yeah, so I think essentially I've got 2 slides left. This one here is if you've looked at the sustainability plan or the community plan, probably a number of these are already familiar to you, but these are things that are either existing or planned. So for example, fire smarting of city-owned facilities, that's underway. And the idea is to expand that out. Blake, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's supposed to expand out to residential at some point into the future. Is that right?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Katie?
The fire smarting, like after the city-owned facilities, the idea is to expand that out to like residential areas and stuff as well, right?
I believe there's some partnership with YG on that right now, but yeah, I'd have to talk to my colleague just to kind of confirm that. But in terms of just the plans for rolling out, but yeah, it's definitely active for sure.
Okay.
I can confirm that because I'm very involved with it. There is
Thanks.
partnerships with nonprofits, the Whitehorse firefighters, the Wildland Fire, and the city, and they're all working towards a massive campaign this summer towards educating people, because the fire breaks are only effective if citizens also do their fire smart, because the embers can travel kilometers and jump above fire breaks. And Fort McMurray has shown very clearly that a house can be intact in the middle of a neighborhood if it's done its fire smart. And yeah, so that's yay for the city and the partnership.
And your comment about education too, the partnering with the Yukon government to lead power outage awareness as well. So there is there is education components already in place and working toward improving upon those. So I won't go through all these this whole list, but we've already actually touched upon a few of them. We've talked about a little bit about renewable energy. Obviously, there's a lot to that conversation, but you know, we mentioned the municipal loans to support energy retrofits, that type of thing. So there is action going on, and what we're going to be doing is, you know, this is a starting point. We're going to say, okay, you have these actions set up. There are some, there was the comment about, you know, there's been things put out there of we're going to have this as an action, and it hasn't been implemented yet. So, you know, those are the starting points. We'll build upon those as we're working toward this new action plan.
Katie, again, just to clarify, it's territorial loans. That's not municipal loans.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. All right. Got that one.
Katie just announced a new program that she wasn't aware of. It's going to be on CBC tomorrow morning.
More easy questions for me to answer tomorrow morning, eh?
Yeah, that's right. Keith, you have a comment, question? Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm certainly really appreciative of the work that's been done with fire smarting in our community. I know I live in Porter Creek area, and our community association is very much involved in getting fire smarting done throughout our community. The one concern I have with fire smarting is this, and I did bring it up in the survey questions. If, for example, I wanted to get, I just want you to know this in case it comes to play somewhere. If I wanted to get my home fire smarted, because I have a home and it's treed in the back, nothing but woods, and I'm no expert in how it would to go about fire smarting properly. And it's going to cost me money, but I would like to know who can do it in town. I'd like a list of people that you can depend on that are skilled enough to do it. And then I know it's really difficult to get anybody to do any work on your property these days in Whitehorse, but we need to know that if I call these people, they are qualified to do proper fire smarting. And maybe I'll have to wait a year, but you know, I'm going to get somebody who knows what they're doing. Second thing I should say is that, you know, I can fire my home, but why is the city allowing people to stack all their firewood right next to their properties? And our houses are close together. And so what? I fire my house, and yet, you know, next door, there's wood everywhere. so it, you know, it just, you've got to do these things. When you do things in community, you've got to do it so a neighborhood understands that, you know, what one person does and one person does not do it impacts each other. And I just, you got to do it as a whole process. The other thing I should mention here is I really heat pumps. I just have to mention that, you know, I'm sure you're aware that there are no regulations with regard to the installation of heat pumps in the city of Whitehorse. You can check the electrical, and I think the territorial government has to check the connection if it's a propane fired or whatever it is. But you've got to be also knowledgeable where to place them on your home. And we have heat pumps in Porter Creek that are commercial heat pumps on houses, and they make so much noise they keep people awake at night. And if you go down to Vancouver or in BC, you'll find that there is the city of Whitehorse, the city of Vancouver, I believe, has a booklet that tells the installer what you should consider when you're installing these things, so that you don't disrupt a neighbor. So I don't know. You can argue to your you know about the worth and value of certain types of heat pumps, but still, if there's no regulation, I'm really hesitant to get anybody to install anything in my home unless it's regulated. And that means the territorial government's got to do something about it to get it done, and the city's got to work with the territorial government to make sure that these things are being installed properly and that there are rules as to where and how they are installed. And so they're installed properly. So those are two things I'd just like to mention. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Florian?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Keith's intervention here, just because it's a perfect example to illustrate how, you know, if the city cannot be everything to everybody. The government cannot be the nanny state forever. Like our economy is going to start to go down. There is no doubt about it. And I think this is a perfect example where the community associations can organize themselves around those issues, because they are real issues. You know, those are really valid comments, but I think the real leverage lies, like, we're members of democracies. A democracy only functions if citizens are both educated and engaged. Otherwise, democracy reverts to autocracy very quickly. And I think that maybe from everything that we've talked about, I think is to revive the democratic process and to empower people, right? And to, you know, essentially, you know, make sure that they know it's like, we cannot do everything. You guys need to be engaged. You know, I mean, there's this whole mindset around the liberal and NDP ways of thinking that is very much, we'll do everything for you. And I don't think that's going to work in the future. I think that is a thing of the past. And to kind of really put a foundation behind this, my partner is a doctor in geology, and for her it's very clear the IPCC's conclusions are extremely conservative. It's a consensus-based document, which means that if everybody needs to be agreeing with what's in this document, guess what? For everybody to agree, it's going to be one of the most conservative assessments of what's going on. And this is not a surprise. Every time we have a new IPCC document, it's way worse than we thought it was. You know, the 2 degrees Celsius, it's done. You know, the carbon is already in the atmosphere. The debt is already promised. Like, things are like, we're going to blow through the 2 degrees Celsius, like, easy. Maybe we'll stop at 2.5, maybe 3, but this is essentially, it's war coming. You know, it's done. Like the little, you know, like, we're going to a completely different world. And, you know, I used to be scared about it, but then I remembered, well, you know, this is no different than any period in human evolution. There's always been those big fluctuations back and forth. And I think right now what we're learning that we are actually global citizens, and we're looking forward to some form of global governance that can address the dozen of issues that we have that need to be addressed on a global level. And we're going to resist it, but it will eventually happen that we will have some form of global governance, but it will take a period of serious unrest. And our mode of thinking needs to change from little, you know, cute, nice things to have to, holy shit, we need to really plan for, like, the basics. Like, we need to have our agriculture sorted, our energy sorted, and you know, I know this is way beyond what you hear in the public media and so on, but we're the people that think about those things right here in this meeting, and I think we need to get with those, you know, face those realities and start to talk about those things in those terms, because yeah, it's coming. Like, if the carbon in the atmosphere is already, like, the last time it was that high was 4 million years ago. So, and this is not going away. That bubble is here. We'll keep on warming, even if we stopped emitting now, as Catherine was saying earlier. It's already there. So every year it's just going to come and come and come and come, and it will go there. You know, it will get to those tipping points. And yeah, it's a heartbreaker and a heart opener at the same time. Damn it, we did it. And well, that, you know, that is how it is, you know, and we're in this together, but we also need to step up and say those hard truths and get engaged in our community to start. Yeah, And I'm afraid our culture is completely screwed right now. Like this, all those, we need more stuff, right? And I mean, like corporations have harnessed all the psychological tools to make us believe, yeah, we need to have more stuff and it needs to grow and growth, we need growth, and it's built into our systems. And so I'm not blaming anybody. We've been building a financial system that's based on exponential growth, and that we've been building it over the last 200, 300 years, right? I mean, it's a big machine now that's like a train on rails, and it needs those 3%. And if you're trying to change it, it derails. And nobody wants it to derail, so it's just going, you know, until it actually hits the limits, you know, and so, yeah, exciting times ahead, I guess.
Okay, thanks for that, Florian. I think it's good for us to, you get focused on sort of the box that you're working in, and I think it's really good to kind of blow the box up a little bit and think about how Whitehorse is not an island. I'm just aware that it's 8:30. I'm not going anywhere, but we had sort of planned this meeting until 8:30. I think, yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about this last slide, Katie?
Yeah, just essentially to sort of wrap things up, we just wanted to give you a overview of our timeline. So obviously we're here talking to you today at the public launch. We have work to do, developing the climate actions, working with the city staff to refine those, talking to NGOs, interested parties, First Nations. And then once we have a draft plan, we're going to come back to you and with another public engagement session. So it's still a little bit of time away. I know some of you were hoping that we'd be a little bit further along with our project, and we're hoping to hear about some of the actions that we're going to be in there. So unfortunately, you are going to have to wait a little bit longer, but we will be coming back to you to discuss that. So essentially, I won't bother flipping to the next slide, but essentially, it's just a reminder that there is the public survey. I forget who it was, but someone already mentioned it. It sounds like they've already filled it out, which is great. We're looking for the public feedback to be able to help inform the work we're doing, and yeah, that's essentially where we are within this progress, or this project. And hopefully we've answered some questions, and we'll be bringing more in a couple months.
And I guess, Katie, I would add that the goal, the timeline that the city's working towards is trying to get this adopted through council before, there is, as someone pointed out earlier, there is a municipal election in October. So the goal is to do this work and get this plan drafted and through before that election. So I guess, yeah, we're available here to answer any other questions or sort of take any other comments. If there's things, if you want to share with us what you think the most, what impacts are you most concerned about, or anything you want us to know at this point in the project, knowing that we're kind of going into this more kind of technical planning phase, and we'll be coming back to you with a draft action plan. And I want to say there's several people on the call who haven't had a chance to speak up. So I'm trying to open the door now for you, if you haven't had a chance to provide your comments or thoughts.
And I believe, Blake, you were going to put your contact info into the chat, but also here, just a reminder that that after this webinar, if you do have questions, comments, that type of thing, Blake is the contact person.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, like I did put my email in the chat earlier, but no, that was a while ago. So please do anytime if you'd like to reach out, if you have ideas, comments, questions, perspectives. Honestly, like this is, to be really candid with you, this is where we have a strict timeline, strict budget to work with. But I am more than happy to take time to hear ideas, perspectives, and honestly, some of the things that if you have unique ideas or unconventional thoughts about, things that the city can do, partnerships, things that might not seem apparent, it's that is really useful information. Even if it doesn't end up making it directly into the plan, I can tell you right now that I'm keeping a parking lot of ideas, and the amount of things. I'm a big fan of partnerships and collaboration and working with other city staff, other partners such as YG and First Nation governments, NGOs. So if there's things that we can do to make things work, I'm happy to take a crack at it. Can't promise that it will always come through. I am just one person on the ladder here. So I'm but I can promise you that I will take your comments seriously and do whatever I can to try to make something happen. So please do reach out if you have any ideas, or if you'd like to know kind of where things are at, or what the next sessions are. I'm happy to chat.
Jim in the chat has a question here. Does the city have jurisdiction over traffic on the Alaska Highway within city limits, especially the speed limit?
On the Alaska Highway, if it's the Alaska Highway, Jim, I'm sorry, I'd have to go and check that one out. Just I don't want to give you the wrong answer on that one. My thought is no. I think that's YG if it's Alaska Highway, but if anybody else in the group knows, please jump in. But I'm happy to check.
I agree. It's YG. I mean, not that the city. I think the city does have some influence, but Forrest, you may have the real true answer here.
Yeah, I have some insight just from both my work and my advocacy work with the Cycling Coalition as well. So yeah, it is within Yukon government's jurisdiction, not the city. However, I would say that there's increasing opportunity for partnership with the city and Yukon government, and I think that could be pursued by the city strongly, and that you would have a more receptive partner there than you may have historically had.
Sorry, that's a really good comment for us. Thanks for that. And yeah, and I'd just like to say too, I know that there are a few folks on the line from Yukon government. I'd just like to say thanks to them as well too. We work, like I said, I'm fairly new with the city, but it's already been a really great partnership working with them already. So I'm really optimistic that if there's things that come up that are opportunities for city and YG partnership, that hopefully we'll be able to pool some ideas and hopefully make some things work. So yeah, so thanks for that, and we'll keep on trucking.
Thanks, JP. I see some folks are saying goodbye. Any last thoughts, direction you want to give to our team? Teresa, go ahead.
Hi, folks. Sorry I didn't chime in earlier. I had a few competing activities going on at the same time. Just wondering if, and maybe I just missed it, but if there are perhaps plans to connect with whatever, I'm sure there's a number of groups or connections on this front, but to connect with some of the youth. There's been the Climate Fridays, and just wondering about kind of adding the element of injecting and the participatory and injecting ideas, but not just ideas, but exploring what might be possible to take the city's plans to a different level with some greater youth engagement and not just engagement, like somehow beyond, and not just a lip service kind of activity. And I think you showed a slide of the plan, the progression for how you're moving forward. I'm wondering about this particular event being online. The possibility exists that you might have been able to capture a whole pile more people, and especially with the recent crazy road conditions with all the water and ice. But I would wonder if some future events for the progress and the moving forward will be of an in-person nature, and just figuring out some creative ways to really land the participation rates that you'd be looking for. Thanks, and yeah, all the power to keeping this moving forward. And I imagine that at some point it may also involve some of the city's decision makers, but that then becomes a bit of a tricky thing of people wanting to address them and get caught up in the politics of it, instead of let's keep this train moving forward and much more successfully and effectively and deeper and stronger, fill in the blanks kind of thing. Thanks, Mussy.
Thanks, Teresa. I mean, the youth idea is really good. We had talked a bit, like, I think, about doing a sort of finding ways to get youth involved, but we should talk about that again. And I hear you with the in-person. I always feel like, yeah, there's pros to both. In this case, we wanted, my team is not located here in Whitehorse, so we want, we need to make sure we're not going to be flying Katie up here for one meeting. But yeah, we'll definitely take that into consideration when we plan our next events.
Sure thing, and maybe it's a hybrid or something as well. Sorry, Blake.
Yeah. Oh no, thanks, Teresa. Yeah, and I can commit to I can say that the city's committed to doing at least one open house once the draft is developed. So once we have a bit more to work with, more to kind of have people kind of view and give opinions on that way. We'd really like to have at least one in-person event to be able to kind of give people an opportunity for that interaction in person. So and to the point about youth, yeah, Zoe, I'd love to chat more about that to see how we can do more engagement. I may also reach out to the climate secretariat, YG. I know that saw familiar name there. So I may just kind of see what kind of best practices there are on that, to see if they have any ideas for how we can encourage more dialogue there with youth. I know that there have been conversations already, actually just very recently, with Fridays for Future and with mayor and council. So there's been some meetings taking place on that level, but I think that being able to chat with groups like that from an operational standpoint would be really great too, to be able to feed those comments in. So
Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mussy.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you all for spending part of your Tuesday evening with us. It's great to have people come, ask us some questions. I've been taking careful notes, so we'll share this with our team, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you again in a few months when we have a draft to share.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Thanks everybody, and thanks Zoe and Katie for facilitating this. Really appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Really appreciate the time that you took, and we will definitely take this and